My name is Rachel Doyle and I'm 41 years old. 11 years ago, my 5-year-old daughter fell 2 floors through a stairwell railing that a management company had been warned about twice. She lived. She learned to walk again on forearm crutches. And in the 11 years it took the courts to finish arguing about whose fault it was, my family did not bring one meal, take one shift, or sit in one waiting room. My brother drove her to a single appointment. Afterward, he sent me an invoice. $40 for gas and his time. I paid it. Last March, the case settled for $1.7 million, into a trust with my daughter's name on it. 6 weeks later, my mother arrived with a lawyer, asking for half, and calling me unfit to manage my own child's money. I didn't argue. I didn't say anything at all. The trustee let them talk for 20 minutes. Then she asked them one question, and the room never recovered from it. If you're new here, subscribe to Calm Verdict Stories, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. The letter came in April, on paper heavy enough that I felt it before I read it. Ruskin Mead, Attorneys at Law. Halloway, Ohio. 2 hours east of the apartment where my daughter and I have lived since she was 6. The language was courteous in the way a locked door is courteous. Our clients seek equitable recognition of their contributions to the minor's care, and reimbursement thereof. Then a second paragraph, gentler on the surface and much worse underneath. Given the mother's financial history, the court may wish to consider whether a neutral party is better positioned to administer the fund. I read that line twice. Then I took a pencil and underlined the mother's financial history, because that was the part that told me everything. They weren't guessing at my history. They'd spent 11 years writing it. Here's what they were actually asking for, underneath the soft clothes. Marin is 16. The settlement doesn't sit in an account anyone can reach. It sits in a court-supervised trust that pays for medical care now and the rest to her at 25. I'm not the owner of that money. I'm not even the trustee. I'm the parent who files the requests. My family wanted 2 things. A share of it, and the standing to decide what happened to the rest. To get the second, they needed someone official to believe I couldn't be trusted, and to make that believable they had a story ready. They'd had it ready for a decade. They didn't want my daughter. They wanted a percentage. But the money was never the part that frightened me. It was the story. Marin was 5. It was a Sunday in October. The railing on the second-floor landing had been reported to the management company twice that year, once by me. I don't describe the fall. I never have and I'm not going to start now. What I'll tell you is that she was in the hospital 9 weeks, that incomplete spinal cord injury means the nerves are damaged but not silent, and that a doctor named Serafian told me on the 4th day that she would probably walk again, and that probably was the most beautiful word I had ever heard. I called my mother from the hallway phone that first night. Deanna. She asked whether the building would sue us. That was her first question. Not how Marin was. Whether we were in trouble. She came to the hospital once, on day 6. She stayed 40 minutes and told me the room smelled like disinfectant. 3 weeks in, when I asked the family to take turns, just evenings, just so I could keep my job, my mother explained that everyone had their own lives, and that this was, quoting her exactly, the kind of thing that swallows a family if you let it. So they didn't let it. Whitlock, the attorney who took the case, told me to start a care log. Not a diary. A record. Every appointment, every mile, every hour of therapy, every person who helped, because damages have to be proven and proof has to be written down while it's happening. I bought a green composition notebook at a drugstore for $1.29 and started that night. I kept it 11 years. I filled 4 of them. I thought I was building a legal document. We moved to a first-floor unit because stairs were finished for us. I took the 4 a.m. shift at a linen service because it ended at noon, and afternoons are when clinics are open. Money was tight in a way that has its own texture, where you know the exact price of everything and buy almost none of it. But that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was the arithmetic of a single adult. One body, two places, always. There were people who filled the gap, and I want them named, because it would be easy to tell this as though the whole world was cruel, and it wasn't. Ines from across the breezeway, who sat with Marin on the nights I couldn't trade out of a shift. Bev at work, who covered me 11 separate times and never made me ask twice. Terrence, the school bus driver, who rebuilt his whole route so the lift stop was last and she wouldn't have 30 kids watching while it lowered. All of them are in the notebook. I wrote down everyone. The cruelty had a return address, and it was in Holloway. Everyone else was just people, and most of them were kinder than the ones I was related to. In March of the second year, my brother Dale drove her to the Belworth Clinic because I was throwing up with the flu and there was no one else. He was 22. He did it, and I want to be fair about that, because fairness is the whole point of telling this correctly. 4 days later, a folded piece of notebook paper came in the mail. Gas plus time, $40. I wrote him a check that afternoon and logged it, because I logged everything, and I put the invoice in the back pocket where the receipts went. He was young and frightened, and it was one ride. That's all true. It is also true that he is the only person in 4 notebooks who ever charged us. Marin asked about them. Of course she did. She was 7 the first time, sitting on the exam table swinging the leg that worked better, and she asked why Grandma didn't come to things. I told her Grandma got tired easily. She was 9 the second time, and I said the same thing, and I heard how it sounded in my own mouth. I kept saying it anyway, for years, because I couldn't stand to be the one who took it away from her. She stopped asking at 11. I told myself she'd lost interest. The case took 11 years because the management company sold the property, then reorganized, then appealed, and each of those things is a year of somebody's life. Marin grew up inside the waiting. She learned to read a room from the doorway. She learned that adults will tell you the truth if you simply don't fill the silence. And somewhere in there, I couldn't tell you the year, she started reading the notebook. I found her with volume 2 open on her lap when she was 13. She wasn't upset. She was turning pages slowly, the way you read something you've read before. I asked if she had questions. She said, no. Then she said, you wrote down everybody. I said that was the point. That the lawyer needed it. She said, I know, and closed it and put it back on the shelf exactly where it had been, squared to the edge, the way she does. I let myself believe she'd been curious about the mileage. Last March, in a hearing that took under 15 minutes, a judge approved the minor's compromise. $1.7 million, into a court-supervised trust with a professional trustee to administer it, a woman from the fiduciary services group named Ms. Rowan, who wore reading glasses on a chain and asked me more questions in 1 hour than my family had asked in 11 years. The local paper ran 4 paragraphs. No photo. Barely a story. 2 hours east, somebody read those 4 paragraphs and did entirely different math with them. My mother remembered my phone number inside of 9 days. The voicemail was warm in a way I hadn't heard since I was a child. Warm the way syrup is warm. She said, we've been thinking about our girl. She used our before she used Marin's name. That was the entire thing, right there, in the order of 2 small words. Then came Rusk's letter, and behind it, the machinery. I found out how big their version had gotten from my Aunt Loretta, my mother's sister, who still mails cards on birthdays and means them. She called me, cool and disappointed, and asked whether I intended to do right by everyone now that things had changed. Now that things had changed. That's when I understood the size of what had been built while I was working 4 a.m. shifts. In Holloway, I was not the daughter who'd been left alone with a hurt child. I was the one who took Deanna's granddaughter 2 hours away and let her sit by the phone for a decade. My mother had been grieving that in public for 11 years, at church suppers, at Loretta's kitchen table. Every year she set that grief down like a dish she brought, and every year the family passed it around. Why would a grieving grandmother lie about her own heartbreak? I sat down that night and typed 4 paragraphs. All of it. I could prove every word. Then I deleted it. I deleted it because I saw what I was doing. I was auditioning. Standing in front of people who had already cast me, asking them to recut the picture. Explaining yourself to people who decided in advance is just asking permission to be believed. So I stopped asking. If you've ever been called greedy by the same people who left you alone with the hard part, you know exactly the feeling I'm describing. Do me a favor and comment one word, logged. I read every one. Ms. Rowan called me the following week and told me plainly what was coming, which I appreciated even where it hurt. The reimbursement claim was weak, she said. Family members almost never recover for informal support, and never without documentation. But the second part, the suggestion that a relative be added to oversee the fund, wasn't frivolous on its face. A trustee is required to consider written objections from interested parties. She would have to hear them, on the record, with everyone present. Then she said the sentence I carried around for 9 days. Bring your records. All of them. Don't summarize. I told Marin there'd be a meeting and that she did not have to be within 100 miles of it. She was at the kitchen table doing calculus. She set the pencil down and looked at a spot slightly past my shoulder, the way she does when she's already decided. I'm coming, she said. And I'm bringing the notebooks. I said I'd already pulled the pages Ms. Rowan needed. Not those pages, she said. I asked what she meant. She said, you'll see it there. And then she went back to calculus, and I stood in my own kitchen understanding that my daughter knew this story better than I did, and had for a while. The night before, I found all 4 notebooks stacked on the table, oldest to newest, squared to the edge. On top of them, the $40 invoice, flattened out, in a clear sleeve she'd taken from her binder. I barely slept. She slept fine. They came to Ms. Rowan's office on a Thursday at 10. The first thing my mother did, after 11 years, was compliment the conference room. Well, don't we all look official? She smiled at Ms. Rowan, and at Rusk, and briefly at me. She did not look at Marin. Not once, the entire morning. She had driven 2 hours to talk about that girl's future and she could not put her eyes on her face. We sat on one side, Marin, me, and 4 green notebooks. Deanna, Dale, and Rusk on the other. At the end of the table, in a chair belonging to nobody's side, Aunt Loretta, because my mother had personally asked her to come and confirm the family's account. They chose her because they were certain of her. That was the first mistake of the morning, and it wasn't the last. Ms. Rowan invited them to state their objection. And I did the only thing I'd planned to do all day. Nothing. I folded my hands and let them talk, because every sentence was one they'd have to stand behind shortly, and I wanted all of them said out loud. Rusk went first, smooth and reasonable. His clients had provided years of support during a difficult period. The estrangement had caused them real pain. They sought only what was equitable, and given the sums involved, a serious question existed about whether the current arrangement served the beneficiary's interests. Then my mother took over, because she'd been waiting 11 years for an audience this attentive. She had a tissue out before she needed it. She described sleepless nights. A granddaughter kept from her. She said, we gave up years for that child, and her voice broke precisely on schedule. At the end of the table, Loretta nodded, the way she'd nodded at every kitchen table in Halloway for a decade. Then Rusk said it. He gestured toward my daughter without looking at her, and said the family simply wanted a say in how the girl's money was handled. Ms. Rowan took off her reading glasses and let them hang. Before I respond to any of this, she said, I have one question. The room went quiet in the specific way rooms do when someone changes their tone. In 11 years, she said, did any of you ever send Rachel a bill? Nobody answered. She asked it again, exactly the same way, with no edge in it at all. Dale said, that was gas money. That was one time. And that was the whole morning, gone, in 9 words. Ms. Rowan opened the trust file, because every financial record I'd ever kept had been submitted to it in March, including a $40 invoice in a boy's handwriting. She set it on the table and turned it so it faced the end of the table. Toward Loretta. That's when Marin opened the first notebook. She didn't hurry. She turned it around and slid it across and said, this is the help column. 11 years. Her voice was level. You can look for your names. My mother said the notebook was incomplete. She said there were things you don't write down. Loretta had already started reading. She went through volume 1. Then 2. Nobody spoke. She found Inez, and Bev, and Terrence the bus driver, and a nurse named Prudy who stayed past her shift twice. And she found herself. 2 entries. Soup, October. Soup, the following March. I'm in here, Loretta said. Twice. She said it the way you'd confess something. Then she looked at her sister, and she said, Deanna. You're not in here at all. And she picked up the $40 invoice and held it for a moment, and set it down slowly, the way you set down something that has burned your fingers. Marin said the only other thing she said all morning. Your family is in the book once, she said. It's the bill. Rusk had nothing to file. You cannot cross-examine 11 years of contemporaneous records against a receipt with your own client's son's handwriting on it. Dale looked at his hands. My mother started to speak twice and stopped both times, and whatever she'd practiced was somewhere she couldn't reach. Ms. Rowan closed the folder. I'm going to note the objection as withdrawn, she said, unless anyone would like it on the record. Nobody would. It ended on paper 8 days later. 1 sentence from Rusk withdrawing all claims. No petition was ever filed. The trust stayed exactly as the court built it, with Marin's name on it and my clean record sitting beside it. Nobody went to jail. Nobody was punished. Nothing that dramatic. They lost the one thing they'd spent 11 years building and guarding, the version of events where they were the injured party. Because Loretta went home and did not keep quiet. She'd held that invoice in her own hand. Holloway heard the real story the same way it had heard the other one, living room to living room, church hall to church hall, except this time it came with a number on it. $40. Dale called me in June. He didn't have a speech ready, which is how I knew it was real. He said he'd thought about that invoice every year since he wrote it, and that he'd sent it because his mother told him to and he was 22 and it seemed like something adults did. I told him I appreciated the call, and I meant it. I also didn't rush to make him feel better, because I'd spent 11 years being the one who kept everybody comfortable. Some of the family reached out after that. Some went quiet in a new way, the way people go quiet when they've been caught believing something because it was easier. I didn't chase any of them. People who need evidence before they'll treat you decently will always need more of it, and I'm finished producing exhibits about my own character. My mother sent one letter in July. I recognized the weight of it in my hand, so I didn't open it. I put it in the back pocket of volume 4, where the receipts go, because that seemed like the right place for things that were never going to be answered. There's one more thing that happened in that room, and it wasn't for them. On the drive home, Marin said, "You didn't look at the back." I asked what was in the back. The last 20 pages of volume 4. I waited until she was asleep. Same green cover, same drugstore notebook. And in the back, upside down, starting from the last page, in her handwriting, a second log. Same format as mine. Date, hours, what happened. She'd started it at 13. The year she found the notebooks and told me she had no questions. She had gone backward through 11 years of my entries and counted the hours. Appointments. Therapy. The 9 weeks. The 4 a.m. shifts that paid for the afternoons. Every hour I'd written down as a fact, she had written down again as something else. At the bottom of the last page there's a total, double underlined. 9,412 hours. And underneath it, 2 words. No invoice. I sat on the kitchen floor with a $1.29 notebook and understood what she'd been doing since she was 13. She hadn't been checking my arithmetic. She'd been keeping the only record that was ever going to matter, in the only language our family had left her, a ledger, and she made sure the last entry balanced. The money changed less than you'd think. It pays for a van with a lift, a physical therapist she actually likes, and the certainty that a bad month is just a month now. What it changed most was what Marin thinks a table is for. She asked Ms. Rowan whether some of it could go toward rides, a small fund at the Belworth Clinic for families who can't get to appointments when there's no second adult in the house. No forms. No repayment. She was very clear about the rules. Nobody gets a bill. My family spent 11 years telling a story about the daughter who took a child away. My daughter answered it in a green notebook, in her own handwriting, in a language they never bothered to learn. The answer was that I never went anywhere at all. If any of this reached something in you, if you've ever been the villain in a story your own family told about you, tell me about it below. I read them all. Subscribe if you'd like to stay, and I'll see you in the next one. This has been Calm Verdict Stories. Thank you for sitting with me tonight. Some of us learn it later than we'd like. Family isn't the people who come back when there's finally something worth taking. It's the people who never sent a bill.